1:23 a.m., April 26, 1986. Reactor 4 ran a safety test. Control systems would be powered down. The reactor would coast on residual heat. In 33 seconds, everything would go wrong. The 2,000-ton lid above Reactor 4 would blow. Through the roof, into the air, into the night. The radiation reached Sweden in 36 hours. The Swedish scientist's Geiger counter was screaming. He was 1,000 kilometers away, in a different country. And the radiation was visible on his equipment. The radiation in your phone right now? 600 times less than what Vasily Ignatenko held. He was 25 years old, a firefighter. He would live 14 days. Before the test, Pripyat was perfect, a model Soviet city. 50,000 people lived there, families, children, everyone who worked at Reactor 4. The city was built for reactor workers, only for that. New, modern, clean. There was an amusement park, a cultural center, a swimming pool. May 1st was coming, the main Soviet holiday. The Ferris wheel had just been painted. It would open tomorrow, the official opening. Children were waiting. In the evenings, the streets were full. Young people, teenagers, couples. Nobody knew what was happening at the reactor. That was the point. The reactor was safe. Officially, that was certain. Senior engineer Anatoly Dyatlov had been pushing for this test for months. He was career-obsessed, brilliant, ambitious, willing to break rules to be first. The test would prove the reactor was safe, would prove his design was superior, would prove he was the best engineer in the Soviet Union. But there was a problem. The reactor design was flawed. The control rods had graphite tips. When they were inserted to stop the reaction, they first accelerated it. Only the last meter of the rod was actual neutron absorber. The first 4 meters were graphite. This meant if the reactor was overheating, hitting the emergency stop would make it heat faster. The RBMK reactors had another flaw, the positive void coefficient. When coolant boils and becomes steam, a void forms. Neutrons move faster through the void. This accelerates the reaction. You lose coolant, the reaction speeds up, not slows down. In other reactor designs, this was impossible. Western reactors had safety features. But the RBMK was Soviet. It was different. It was pushing the limits. Safety was secondary to speed, to proving it could be done. Dyatlov knew about the flaws. Everyone in nuclear knew. But the test would prove it did not matter. That Soviet engineering transcended mere physics. The test was supposed to prove the reactor could survive a blackout. If external power failed, could the spinning turbine create enough electricity to keep pumps running? The answer was yes. The test had been done before. It was routine. Except this time, Dyatlov was changing the parameters. He wanted to test at lower power levels, to test the design even more thoroughly. Nobody told the control room staff this was non-standard. They did not know they were being asked to violate multiple safety protocols. The test began at noon on April 25th. Reactor 4 was gradually powered down, from 100% to 50%. As it came down, Dyatlov's goal was to test the turbine generator. So he disabled the automatic shutdown system. If something went wrong, nothing would stop the reactor automatically. Dyatlov also disabled the heating backup system, the one that was supposed to cool the reactor if primary cooling failed. He was removing every safety net one by one. At one point, someone mentioned these violations. Dyatlov overruled them. He had authority, he had confidence, he had been right before. By 9 p.m., everything was ready. The reactor was stable at 50% power. The test was scheduled for midnight, then delayed to 1 a.m., technical reasons. Then delayed again, to 1:20 a.m., no clear reason, just delays. At 1:23 a.m., Dyatlov gave the order, begin the test. The first action was to shut down the reactor's cooling system, to simulate a blackout. But the reaction would continue generating heat. The turbine would slow, power output would drop. The backup generators should have started automatically. But backup generators take seconds to reach full power. There is a window of vulnerability. In that window, the reactor has no cooling and no power for cooling pumps. At this point, hitting the emergency shutdown button would stop it. But the emergency shutdown would fail. Because of the graphite tips, 12 control rods had already been manually removed to keep the reaction going. Regulations said you needed at least 30 control rods in the core. They had 19. But Dyatlov wanted the reaction to keep going, to prove his design. The temperature continued to climb. The void coefficient was creating more steam, more voids, more neutrons accelerating, more heat, a feedback loop. Control room operators were shouting. Reactor 3 showed a sudden jump in temperature. Something was wrong. Dyatlov said continue. They continued. At 1:23 and 39 seconds, a supervisor tried to press the emergency shutdown button. The button jammed. It had been stuck since morning. No one had reported it. 33 seconds. From the moment the test began to the moment the reactor became uncontrollable, the pressure in Reactor 4 exceeded all limits. The fuel melted. Uranium dioxide, 30 tons, suddenly exposed to full heat. Water flashed to steam. The entire coolant system vaporized in seconds. The pressure built with nowhere to go. At 1:23 and 45 seconds, the bottom biological shield failed. The 2,000-ton steel and concrete lid was lifted straight up. It tore away from its bolts. It hung in the air for a moment. Then it fell back down, at a different angle, not centered. The explosion was thermal and mechanical, not nuclear, but it released radioactivity anyway. The graphite moderator inside was burning. Exposed to air, it was combusting. The initial blast had destroyed the reactor building, killed everyone in the immediate vicinity instantly. The graphite fire burned for days. It burned hotter than fuel fires. Nothing could stop it immediately. The radiation cloud rose into the atmosphere. Iodine 131, cesium 137, strontium 90. The cloud did not stop at the border. It followed the wind. It went everywhere. The core temperature exceeded 2,000 degrees Celsius. Vasily Ignatenko was in his apartment with his wife Lyudmila when the sirens started. He did not hesitate. He was a firefighter. He got dressed. He went to help. Lyudmila followed. She did not tell him she was 3 weeks pregnant. She could not stay home, not when he was going toward danger. The first firefighters arrived at 2 a.m. They had no idea what they were heading toward. The reactor building was on fire. They needed to extinguish it before it spread. Vasily Ignatenko led a crew to the roof to get water on the fire. The roof was covered in debris, radioactive debris, pieces of reactor core and graphite. The graphite pieces smelled like ozone, metallic, sharp, different from any fire smell. Ignatenko was standing on the burning reactor core. He could have weighed what was in his lungs. The dose rate there was 3,000 roentgens per hour, a lethal dose, in 1 hour. He received his annual lethal dose in minutes. The Soviet firefighter commander was Vladimir Pravik. He knew it was bad. He ordered the men to keep working, keep fighting the fire. The water was running off the reactor. It was running into the surrounding ground. By 3 a.m., the fires were contained. The immediate danger was reduced. But everyone who worked that night would start feeling sick. Within hours. First the burns, red skin, like severe sunburn, but on the inside of their mouths too. Then the vomiting, hours of vomiting, uncontrollable. Then the blue Cherenkov glow. When radiation moves faster than light in water, some firefighters reported seeing a blue glow around their bodies, around other men. Hospitals filled within hours. The doctors had never seen cases like this. Acute radiation syndrome, the skin separating from the body, hair falling out in clumps. Within 6 hours, 1,000 people were hospitalized. They did not know what was happening to them. Vasily Ignatenko held a piece of graphite in his hands, the size of a fist. He was laughing, joking, until the pain started. Lyudmila was at his bedside. The doctors told her to leave. She refused. The radiation started affecting his organs. Kidney failure, liver damage, heart stress. By day 3, he could not eat, could not drink without vomiting. His skin began to break down, large areas peeling away, raw tissue underneath. By day 6, he was in complete organ failure. His body was shutting down. Lyudmila was pregnant. She did not know the radiation had already infected the fetus. She held his hand. She whispered to him. She did not leave. On May 1st, Vasily Ignatenko died. He was 25 years old. The Soviet government waited 36 hours before evacuating Pripyat. The people were told it was a precaution. For 3 days only. Residents packed one suitcase, took their pets, said goodbye to their homes. Some took irreplaceable items, photo albums, documents, things they would never see again. The buses drove out of Pripyat, past the Ferris wheel, past the amusement park, past the city sign. People looked back. They would not come back, not for 30 years, not ever. Over 100,000 people were evacuated in 36 hours. Some of them were already receiving lethal doses, already contaminated, already dying. The Soviet government called them liquidators. 600,000 people eventually deployed to manage the disaster. They were told it was safe. They were given protective equipment that did not work. They worked without knowing their dose limits, without medical monitoring. Many for only minutes. Some died within hours. Some took months. Some died years later from cancer. Coal miners were brought in. They were asked to dig under the reactor. If the molten core melted through the reactor vessel and hit groundwater, it would cause a second explosion. A second explosion that would have made half of Europe uninhabitable. They were given no protection. They were sent to tunnel under a burning reactor. Helicopter pilots were recruited. They needed to drop boron and lead on the burning reactor core. The pilots were told they would receive heavy doses. Most would likely die. 83 helicopter sorties dropped 3 tons of boron and lead. The lead-lined casing of some helicopters showed lethal doses within a year. 3 divers were sent into the flooded reactor basement to find and drain the water tanks. If the molten core hit the water, it would explode. One hand grenade could have done the same. Soviet records said they survived, but records were changed. The truth is unknown. The sarcophagus was built around the damaged reactor, a steel and concrete tomb. It was built by workers who would accumulate the highest doses of any liquidators. Average dose for a sarcophagus builder, 25 rem, lethal over time. The sarcophagus was completed in 111 days. April to November 1986. It was meant to last 30 years, to contain the radiation while the core decayed. Mikhail Gorbachev waited 14 days before speaking to the world. 14 days. While Sweden detected the radiation, while Europe measured the fallout. 14 days. While the reactor core was still burning, while people were dying. When Gorbachev finally spoke, he called it a setback, an accident, manageable. The KGB suppressed all real information. Doctors were forbidden from discussing cases. Families were separated. Parents sent to hospitals away from children. To prevent emotional attachment, children were told their parents were gone, that they had accepted their fate, that goodbyes would not help. Medical records were falsified. High-dose patients were recorded as receiving low doses. Blame was placed on a single person, on Anatoly Dyatlov. He was convicted of criminal negligence, sentenced to 10 years. But the real fault was the design. The reactor design was flawed from the start. The flaws were known. Soviet engineers had reported them, been ignored. But admitting the design was flawed would have meant admitting the entire program was flawed. So instead, one man went to prison, and the system continued. The Soviet Union tried to repair its nuclear image. It commissioned a new, safer reactor design. But the original flawed design remained in operation in other Soviet reactors. Graphite-tipped control rods, positive void coefficient, all still there, all still dangerous. 3,000 cases of thyroid cancer in children appeared within 5 years in Ukraine and Belarus. The Soviet government had distributed iodine to the population. Too late, too little. Some children received the iodine, some did not. It depended on which officials decided what. The genetic damage will appear for generations, in descendants, in blood cancers. The Soviet Union officially reported 56 deaths from the disaster. The real number, between 4,000 and 7,000 deaths attributable to Chernobyl. Some estimates reach higher, 15,000, 20,000. They will never be counted, because admitting the true number would be admitting the Soviet state murdered them. Lyudmila Ignatenko had a daughter, born after Vasily died, born with a weak heart. The radiation had contaminated the fetus, killed the first baby, damaged the second. She would keep having children. Each would be born with increasing health problems. She outlived her husband by 18 years, living on a widow's pension, in poverty. The Pripyat amusement park was never opened. The Ferris wheel never carried a single child. 30 years later, the exclusion zone still exists, a radius of 30 kilometers around the reactor. Wolves returned to the forest. No humans for 3 decades. The radiation does not seem to stop them. Bears, lynx, wild boar. They live in the radiation. Their lifespans are shorter, their cancer rates higher. In 2016, a new sarcophagus was built. The old one was falling apart. Radiation was escaping. The new sarcophagus is designed to last 100 years. but the core will be radioactive for 100,000. The Reactor 4 site is still generating heat. The graphite is still burning deep in the core. Water is still seeping into the reactor basement. The water is still radioactive. The leak is ongoing. Pripyat is still empty. Abandoned buildings stand, apartments with personal belongings still inside. Anatoly Dyatlov was released after 8 years, lived another 20 years, dying of heart problems, never admitting fault.